Okay, hi, this is Erika of Grapefruit and Gardenia Designs and the Knit Kind podcast. We're on about take 10. I have been really busy designing. I recorded a podcast with Melissa Littlefield of Knitting the Stash that's going to air in September. And I've been designing and doing some things for, tap somebody's foot, some things for Vermont Sheep and Wool. So want to see what I've been up to? I'd love to share some of it with you. I will say now, if you're inclined, please like and subscribe the video. You can find me on Ravelry as NittyElf40, Erika Field's Pattern Store, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Grapefruit Gardenia. All right, so let's see. I'm not wearing any knitting today. I am wearing these earrings. These are Maker earrings. They are from, maybe we'll do this. This will help you hear me. How's this? They are from Original Sin, C-Y-N. She shows at the Artisan Fair Up Island on Martha's Vineyard. So I have been working on some designs. So let me show you. I'm going to jump right in and show you some of the designs instead of a big commentary first. One, I wanted to let you know, if you don't already, that Vermont Sheep and Wool in Tunbridge, Vermont is going to be October 5th and 6th this year. And, let's see if we can do this in a cute way. They're going to be celebrating camelids, alpaca, and others. It is the International Year of the Camelid, I think is what I saw. And so one of the, I don't know if she's an organizer, but she is doing the website. So I'll call her one of the collaborators or organizers, is Terry Miller of Snowshoe Alpaca Farm in Vermont. And when we were writing back and forth, because I am participating in Designer Alley, we were working on that piece, she asked me about working in alpaca. And I said, I love working in alpaca. I know not everyone does. It's not for everyone. It's not for every project. So Terry asked me about potentially using some of her yarn for design, and hadn't felt it before, hadn't seen it in person before that I recall. Maybe I have at a festival in the past, and I looked at her website and she had some gorgeous fall colors. And so I was thinking, can I turn around something fast enough for Vermont Sheep and Wool to feature the fall colors in her yarn and celebrate alpaca? And I kind of dropped everything else I was doing, although it was also an okay point to do that because I'll show you what else I finished. I dropped it and I said, yeah, let's do it because I want to celebrate alpaca with you and your yarn looks beautiful. And so she sent me the fall colors I had asked about. I think it's pumpkin spice, tamarack, and then a natural are the names of them. But you'll see, ooh, look at these colors. Isn't that? And you know what? It's not even capturing it as well in here because we're not out with the sunlight on it. But these colors, cat on lap. Honestly, I don't know how I'm doing this today. These colors are just so good. It is a worsted, let's call it a worsted weight. It's 200 yards, and I think they all weighed between like 100 and right around 100 to 113 grams or so per ball. Now, it is half alpaca and half wool. So, and the wool is fine wool. So it doesn't say if it's specifically merino or if it's a blend of fine wool. But what you're getting is obviously a very soft product between the alpaca and the fine wool. And then by including the fine wool in the process when the alpaca is going through the mill, mills are able to process it a little bit more easily, is my understanding. Sorry, my cat just literally planked down in my lap. And she's an old girl, so we kind of let her get away with a lot of things. So alpaca blended with wool, a little bit easier to mill for more mills, as I understand it. Very warm, very soft, and by including the wool mix with it, especially a non-superwash wool, you're getting a little bit more memory, a little less drape, kind kind of takes away some of the things that people who are hesitant to work with 100% alpaca might shy away from, like, growth, which to me, it can actually be really beautiful, especially in accessories where you want some drape. But it's sort of like a step in the direction of working with alpaca without going all in on 100% alpaca. So I designed the cowl. I'm going to call it the Tunbridge cowl because of Vermont Sheep and Wool being in Tunbridge, Vermont. And there's a few things about the design that I thought I'd share with you today. Now I've almost finished writing it up. It hasn't been tested yet, so don't look for it on Ravelry yet. My goal is to have it launch with the festival, but I did a couple of fun things. I marled the bottom and I did a farrow rib on the bottom. And I kind of liked how it looked like leaves that had fallen on the ground when the reds and the oranges and the golds all mixed together, and you can just picture jumping into a leaf pile. And then I did the farrow rib because I liked that it wasn't like a pure 2x2 or 1x1, but it wasn't a seed either. It's sort of a mix of seed and ribbing. And of course, because it's marled, I did it on a larger needle as opposed to a smaller needle for the ribbing. And then this color was just too perfect not to do this maple leaf. And I want to tell you a little bit about the maple leaf. It's pretty much the reason I bought this book, Knitivation, by Erika. And if you have watched the interviews with her, one of them in particular, somehow got some, oh, it's my own hair on my nose. One of them in particular, I think it was Irina's interview on Fiber Chats. Irina always asks the question of what makes an original design. And I've talked to her about that, and you'll see other people she's interviewed talk to her about that. And then you have somebody who put out a stitch dictionary, but a stitch dictionary that's incredibly detailed, right? So sure, other people have made some of these motifs before, but have they made it exactly like this? Have they made it in these colors, in that gauge? Have they done the repeats the same way? I looked up maple leaves, right? There are so many different ones. And then there's how many stitches and what weight yarn are you knitting it in and how do you incorporate it into a pattern? And one of the things that Andrea said is, yes, she wants people to take those and put them in patterns and publish the patterns as their own. Now, I will, of course, in my pattern, cite the patterns that came from her, the stitches that came from her, but it's an interesting conversation because do you cite every single stitch that you got out of a stitch dictionary? Do you cite seed stitch? Where did seed stitch start? I'm giving myself some real tongue twisters. So it's kind of part of our craft that depending on what you're designing and when you're designing it and how and what you're using, you could have a whole dialogue about this different piece of who owns stitch patterns or copyrights, or how do you use them and once they're incorporated into a final pattern or finished product. So anyway, knowing that Andrea wanted people to use these designs and promote it, right? It promotes her book as well as promoting the design and actually putting it to use instead of just knitting swatches or only knitting things for your personal use, but you still have to do something with them. So one of the things I had to figure out was this is a large motif. And so I thought about how many times I wanted it to fit into a cowl. Okay, I think I'm gonna have to move Kitty because she's getting a little restless. Here you go. Say hi. Okay. All right. So I had to think about how many times I wanted it to fit around the cowl. And I was originally just going to do 2 when I was going to do something else in the middle. And then when I thought about it, I thought, it doesn't have to wear just a certain way or show just a certain way. Part of it is the experience of knitting it, right? The product versus process knitting. And so I'm going to insert a picture of, in the end, how I decided to wear it, kind of with a leaf in the middle. But you can wear a leaf on the sides, you can wear one in the middle, you can scrunch it down so it's not as seen, you can pull it up so it's more seen, and so on. And the other thing that I did is I thought about how I wanted the knitter to experience knitting the pattern. And so one of the things was I had to break it up in between, because if you do stranded knitting, you know that there's something that's just not as elegant or fun for many of us or finish looking when you are carrying yarn, especially like a red or an orange behind a white across a long span with no other stitches. So for one, I wanted to break up. I have four leaves around the cowl, and I had to break it up with something. So I sort of did this pattern where it's almost like, you know, leaves falling. And then just a motif in the middle, and then similarly up here. So and down here. So part of that was to do with process and experience, and part of it was to do with design. And then similarly on the bottom, I sort of broke up the way that this went right around the leaves because I wanted a little bit more white space. So again, that's the type of thing you do where you're taking a stitch from a source, but then you're incorporating it into a design. And in the middle here, you might be looking at this going, it looks like you forgot to take out a lifeline. Well, I don't know why. I don't love how it captures on video or in photos, but I do like how it looks in person. So I'm gonna leave it in the design. I did a little Swedish weave in the middle here. So if you look closely, you can actually see that on the top and bottom, I have the orange color over the gold, and in the middle, I have the white. Excuse me. And part of that is also that I liked the idea that, you know, you kind of have the white dancing through here, representing light on the leaves or the veins through the leaves. And then you have it up top here. And so I wanted to have a little bit in the middle too. I didn't like it with none of it in the middle. So that was my design choice. And then the top motif is also from the book, but I did a couple things with it. One, I turned it upside down. It was called Trailblazer, and I flipped it upside down with the idea that when you're in Vermont, you do trailblaze, I guess, right? But also kind of like a mountain as opposed to just a trail. So if you look at it in the book, you'll see it like this. But in the cowl, I liked it like this. And I also played around and, decided, I don't know, I feel like I have pollen in my throat now, about holding the white actually dominant, as opposed to most of the time you'd think of working on a white background and holding the other color dominant. So those are a few design decisions that I made within a cowl using a resource where some people might not feel like that's designing and other people might. And you're always on the spectrum of design. The other thing I did here is this one's tapered. I have mentioned I have a really narrow neck. In the design, in the pattern, when it's written, you'll have three options. One is to just make a straight cowl. So your bottom circumference will go straight up to the top. Same motif, same stitches, but it will be a straight cowl. The other option is to only do one decrease, it's bottom up. So you'll do one decrease and it will be a more subtle tapering in. And then this one has two decreases. So you can see it's a much more substantial shaping. I'll try to remember to insert a photo of myself wearing this morning to show you how this one fits on me. And I probably, in the end, when I do the pattern, should also say the size of my neck circumference, because I think that would be helpful and how much E is. So that will be the Tunbridge cowl that will be available for Vermont Sheep and Wool. And obviously we encourage you to explore using alpaca fiber. If you'd like to check out Snowshoe Alpaca Farm. Terry, I believe, has a whole new batch of yarn from the mill that she's going to be dyeing up. So stay tuned for her offerings, as well as some of the other vendors who will be at Vermont Sheep and Wool, who will have some gorgeous alpaca wool. I'm certain they will have beautiful fall colors. And if you are inspired by the surroundings when you're there, or when you're home dreaming of being there, perhaps, as we all do when we miss out on certain festivals, living vicariously, it will be available through Ravelry, possibly through my Etsy shop. And I always try to have an alternative for people who are not Ravelry users. So I will probably try to post it on Love Crafts if I can find a yarn substitution that is on their website, which is what you have to do to publish there. So please consider checking out some alpaca or alpaca blend yarn and being motivated and inspired by the surroundings in Vermont. I also For those of you, I like to maximize yarn usage. So depending on what size you knit, you might have enough left over to do a hat. Okay, so, whoops, losing my microphone. So talking a little bit about why we design. There is the design for things like this for a special event, or to highlight a certain kind of fiber, or because you're just loving the fall colors or summer colors or whatever it is. And then there's the designs that for me are a little bit deeper, or a lot deeper, maybe I should say, in artistic expression. And so I'm telling you that today because I've talked a little bit about why I design. People ask, right? Most of the time, you're not out there designing because it's the most lucrative thing you could possibly do with your time. But for me, there's something I love knitting, and I really enjoy teaching, and I enjoy art. And so for me, it is because I get these ideas and I want to share them. I want to share them with others who will feel similarly inspired. So sometimes, I've talked about my Aquina cowl, and what inspired me there is yarn I saw at a local yarn store, and the colors were just amazing, and I brought it on vacation, and then it reminded me of Aquina, and so I thought about how to incorporate stitches into that reminded me of waves and rocks and the clay cliffs and all of these pieces inspired by nature. I have been inspired by yarn and people, so something like the Nourishment cowl, which we talked about the story of farm yarn, and Peg and Amanda from Junction Fiber Mill, and Rachel and Matt from Meadowfed Lamb, and how just those pieces came together, and I wanted to make a cowl that was comforting in wearing it, and also when you knitted it you kind of felt this connection to people and yarn and nourishing each other, particularly in a time when our world can be really hard. I don't know if you're feeling it, but I think many of us are, for all huge variety of reasons. Melissa Littlefield of Knitting the Stash recorded an interview or conversation with me in July. It's going to air in September, and that's going to tell you more about something I felt like I had to design, like the difference between being an artist or a fiber artist and a knitter who produces a pattern. And that might be oversimplifying, and there's nothing wrong with either one. But why I design personally, me, Erika, Grapefruit, Gardenia, that's why I design, is because there are certain pieces that to me, like, I just have to do. Like an artist will tell you they have to make a painting or they have to make a sculpture, right? The artist who sees something in the marble and chisels it out, as opposed to takes the marble and figures out what to chisel in. And so one design for me is that Unbroken Circle cowl. I'm going to talk about it on the Knitting the Stash podcast. I'm going to record my own podcast about it that focuses on it. And I bring it up today in the context of why I design, because we got a sad, sort of bittersweet in a way update yesterday from Paula Ahrens of Dancing Pony Sheep Farm in New Hampshire. And Paula shared the news that her beloved ewe, Ellie Mae, passed away on August 1st. And to give a really succinct summary here, because I'm going to talk about it a lot more when I talk about that cowl, it was the type of thing that you go, wow, everything sort of happens on a timeline for a reason that maybe we don't totally know or understand all the time. But when I first heard her story that she told on the Millcast episode 71 this past winter, I knew that there was a design that was going to come out of her story. And I didn't know when it was filed away. Well, then Melissa of Knitting the Stash announced in the spring, maybe April, that she was looking for designers to work in farm yarn with her shorn yarn that she curates and creates and has done so. This is the 5th iteration, so this is Shorn 5. And so I had other things lined up, but I, for whatever reason, just said, you know what, I'm gonna see if I can tell the story, Paula's story, Ellie Mae's story, in the shorn farm yarn, because Melissa's looking for a celebration of those connections. And I just did it with Paula's blessing and Peg and Amanda's knowledge because, again, the story came through them. So I just really wanted to make sure everybody knew it was happening in a way that was really meant to honor and celebrate something and not take someone's story and run with it and not connect it back to them. So the fact that that was all done this spring, such a much faster timeline than I ever would have imagined, and now Ellie Mae has passed away, I'm just so glad that we did this while she was still alive, that Paula knew, and I am going to be knitting a version of it in Ellie Mae's last clip of her, or I think it's the last clip, it's the most recent yarn that Paula actually just got, and I'm going to be knitting one of those to give to Paula at Vermont Sheep and Wool. It kind of blows me away, and I'm just this little tiny observer, and I didn't even observe firsthand this story. I just heard it, and I just feel really grateful, I guess, to know this story and be able to have honored Ellie Mae's life and connection to people in a design while she was living. And now that she's passed away, it's kind of gonna honor her memory, which I think is amazing. And then here's what else I have to tell you, because this blows my mind. And it's a connection, it's a coincidence. But if you believe that the principle that there are no coincidences and everyone's connected to everyone, I will share this with you. So if you've been watching the podcast, the last couple of episodes, you know that the design I worked on this summer is a sweater, again, to honor the farm yarn, to work with different producers, and that it is inspired by hydrangeas. And when Paula told Ellie Mae's story and kind of read what I think they called, her obituary yesterday, it was like a tribute poem to her, I found out that her original name when she was adopted by Paula was Hydrangea, and they changed it to Ellie Mae. So let's just say maybe part of the reason that the hydrangeas were so spectacular this summer had to do with the weather, of course, but maybe it was also to honor Ellie Mae. And I'm going to show you the sweater that I finished. I wasn't going to show you, but I am now. Make sure I have the back in the back, which I don't know. Oh wait, I have a drop hem. There we go. Okay. I have a longer hem in the back so I can tell. So this is it. It's been folded, so I just took it out to show you now. This is the yoke. This one is short sleeves, but the final pattern will have it so that you can do short, 3/4 or long sleeves. And I'm floating some ideas for names, but they might change, we'll see. And I am working with Hands and Heart Farm on the contrast color here. And then Meadow Fed Lamb is the oatmeal color here. And so they also know about it, and they will have yarn again in the future. And when they do, we'll talk about their yarn, and we'll talk about many alternatives. But this is a DK farm yarn. So again, the whole idea is there's a gauge. There are different characteristics that you will get with different yarns, and I'll talk about this sweater in another piece. But when it comes out, we got a ways to go. I have just started the design writing process, the pattern writing process, the grading, and it will have to go through tech editing, it will have to go through test knitting. So there are a lot of pieces before this one's going to come out. But in light of the fact that we learned Ellie Mae's original name was Hydrangea, and I've teased this design and just love sharing it with you, I figured why not today. It's a special day on Martha's Vineyard. So all rules are out the door. Okay, so what else is going on? So my Roslyn vest, I did take photos in front of my grandmother's cottage. So if you heard that story, when all these patterns come out, they will all have a dedicated podcast, because I found that you like listening to those and I like sharing about them. But that vest was named after my grandmother's cottage, which was As You Like It, and Rosalind is the Shakespeare heroine from that play. So that vest is in testing, and a few testers have finished. If you're still listening and you're a size, in my size chart, it's 6 through 10. So it's like a 56-inch bust to a 68-inch bust. If you're in that size range and you want to test, please reach out. Check out Yarn Pond. I kept the call open. I had testers from sizes 1 through 5 and 9, but those other ones, I would love to have somebody test every size if possible. I know it's challenging to get testers in every size, and I've given a nice long timeline, and it's a bulky vest, so you can knit it up in about 2 weeks. Some people can knit it in 2 days, not me, but 2 weeks to 4 weeks is really not a problem for most sizes, I would say. So if you're still interested in that, check it out. There's still plenty of time. And I'm happy to extend the deadline if somebody's willing to knit a bigger size and needs a little bit more time. I think I'll mostly leave it at that today. I have a couple other things written down, but I like leaving it to a half an hour. So let's all celebrate everything that's great about the end of summer in the Northern Hemisphere, cruising into fall, which we love. Knit kindly, live kindly, and I'll catch up with you again soon.